about was the recovery plan. So I know Russ is going to give us an update of what's happening in Stockport, but just to give him some context and to remind people why we thought this would be a good subject to talk about. We are immediately, as lockdown happened, everyone went into response mode, to head down, get work done, get things in place, make sure communities are well serviced, that the vulnerable are shielded, that the humanitarian response is right and correct, and every council and local authority put in place their community hubs and people were redeployed. 10 weeks on, we're beginning slowly, although it seems like Boris is on a fast track, to bring people out of lockdown and bring back a sense of normality to life. Within Greater Manchester, that recovery is being termed Build Back Better, and each local authority is, I imagine and I understand, is beginning to think about what does their recovery look like in their place. So I know that Stockport are well ahead with this. I see opportunity here for the local pilot work and more broadly physical activity in this space. And because I know Russ has been doing work on this, I thought it would be interesting for us all to hear how that's happened, what the next steps are, and why Stockport have viewed it as an important part of their recovery plan. Again, feel free to use the chat to pose any questions. I'm sure Russ will be happy to answer questions at the end as well. But I'll hand over to Russ to give us the picture from a Stockport point of view.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, so as Richard just said, all local authorities are starting to look at recovery phase now. Obviously not everything's in the recovery phase, but things are starting to move into that. And in Stockport, we wanted to make sure that physical activity was the front and centre of that work, because as we know, I mean, I don't need to convince any of you, physical activity is going to be really important and can play a really important role in people recovering from lockdown, whatever stage of lockdown they're in and have been in. And as many of you know also, all our physical activity work in Stockport is governed by an active community strategy. Under that strategy, we have a number of programs. So what we wanted to do, as well as the business as normal, look at how the work we're doing in Stockport, or some of it, could be realigned to directly support the recovery work, as well as continue to achieve the outcomes that we'd already set for those programs within our strategy. So the starting point for that was to look at the programs and look at what assets we had, both in terms of finance, but also in terms of physical and in terms of people. So within those programs, there are people who are furloughed. There are people who aren't furloughed because they are grant funded in various forms or local authority funded through public health programs. And there's also potential to start, particularly since we started this piece of work, government have said that anyone on furlough can start to come back part-time as part of that furlough reintegration work. So we can start to bring people back off furlough as and when things allow, aligned to any easing that goes on from a national level. So within that, and we've got Adam and Sasha on the call, so I'll go over some key points, but Adam and Sasha will be able to fill in a bit more detail on certain aspects of them, or help me to do that. So within this piece of work, the starting point was, what assets do we have now? So not necessarily looking at people currently on furlough that we would want to bring back, but what have we got now? And we've identified within our assets what we've got and what the immediate need is. Where can we start to make an immediate impression as part of this recovery work? So initially we identified 4 areas. We've actually got 5 now. So the first one is marketing and communications. So how do we use our marketing and communications to better communicate messages that are coming out nationally from government and Public Health England, and including Sport England, to get that message across in Stockport as to how people can be active, become more active, and use physical activity as part of their recovery and as they come out of lockdown, and also for those people who can't come out of lockdown yet. So obviously it's still a cohort of shielded people who actually their progress out of lockdown is going to be much slower than other people. So we've identified that marketing and communications has got a key role to play, and in a minute I'll just come back and see if Adam wants to add a bit more detail to that. The second one was COVID patients themselves. So people who have been in hospital, so in our case Stepping Hill, who've been in hospital with COVID, how do we help them to use physical activity as part of their recovery? So as part of that work, we've, in Stockport, as there will be in your local authorities, there's a COVID recovery programme which is clinically led. It'll be a primary care and secondary care FT group. So in Stockport, that group exists. We've got representation on that through our staff who run the GP referral programme that Public Health Fund. So that's part of our current asset in people because they're around. So we've got representation on the COVID patient recovery group in Stockport to look at how we can intervene as patients step down into what's called intermediate care. So as patients are discharged from Stepping Hill, they're discharged into intermediate care, and it's at that point we want to intervene as part of their recovery to use physical activity. So what the initial plans are there is we've already, through the work that Sasha and Ross have been doing, identified some activity packs. But what we don't want to do is just provide an activity pack, because we know from other work we've been doing for years that simply providing an activity pack on its own without the additional support in how to use that pack and that continuing support in the use of that pack, that very often the majority of those packs aren't used to their maximum. So we want to get maximum use out of those packs. So during that intermediate intervention, that intermediate step down, we're going to link in with the clinicians who are working in that intermediate care. And some of that might be physios, some of that might be respiratory specialists, etc. And it's going to be those clinicians who are going to support the recovery patients in order to make the best use of those packs to increase their physical activity, where physical activity can play a significant part in their rehab from COVID. And we know the clinical data is telling us that some people will take a long time to recover from COVID, and actually some people will never fully recover from having COVID. So this isn't just a short-term piece of work. This is something we can continue over a longer period of work, and we can build it into the wider work of the active community strategy at a later date. But the immediate phase is to intervene with the clinical support with those patients. Now in Stockport, we've had roughly about 400 people who've ended up in hospital with COVID, just over. We can't afford to support all of those, so we've made a provisional decision, which we're going to take to the steering group on Thursday, I think it is, to say that we focus on COVID patients who have been admitted to ICU, because they're going to have the greatest need. So that piece of work is developing. We've identified the cohort, and we've identified some budget to go alongside that. And some of the local pilot money will also be put into that. It's not going to fund all of it, but it'll make a contribution to that. The third group is older people and care homes. And again, it's based around an activity pack. All care homes in Stockport have been provided with IT support, so they've all got a tablet, or I think we've issued 87 tablets out to the care homes in Stockport. So again, this This pack is going to be provided to a pilot group of care homes initially. And as always with these things, you want to focus on organisations and individuals who want to engage. Don't try and convince people who aren't interested at the moment to do that. Focus on those that want to engage, build up your evidence base of impact, word will spread, and then others will want to get involved. So we're going to link in the support around the online support, but also each care home has an activity coordinator. They've got a care home activator, that's the word I'm looking for. They've all got activators in Stockport. I'm not sure whether, so I suspect they probably will have in your authorities as well. So the activator is going to be engaged in that care home to help residents use these activity bags and the resources within them, as well as also the online digital support that we can provide, because the care homes all have access to that online support. The fourth one is actually the Sport England Innovations Fund. So we're going to target a locality in Stockport where we know people, residents, and for those of you who know Stockport, it's Lancashire Hill. So it falls within the Tame Valley locality, which is one of the most deprived. It's the most deprived in Stockport, but it's one of the most deprived in the country as well. And it's got tower blocks, a lot of tower blocks, and we know from the work we've been doing in those areas over the lockdown that residents, there's been a significant impact on mental well-being during lockdown, because there's very little access to open space. The vast majority of people in this locality have got no garden. Green space and open space is limited. People don't often feel comfortable using it for a whole host of reasons. So we're going to putting a bid into Sport England Innovations to focus on this area, but we're going to work with Team Around the Place, which in Stockport we're working in localities with multidisciplinary teams who focus on supporting each locality. We're calling that Team Around the Place. So we're working with the Team Around the Place in the Lancashire Hill, led by a residents group. The residents have come to us and said, we need help, this is what we need, this is what we'd like to do. So it's a residents-led piece of work. And it's particularly going to look at supporting around that mental well-being, but particularly focusing on residents and families living with addiction, because that's a key. That we know that living with addiction the lockdown has had significant impact disproportionately on those individuals, and also domestic abuse. So we know that the lockdown, some of the outcomes of lockdown, the negative outcomes, have been around challenges on mental health, but the triggers for those, two of the big triggers for that, is around addiction and around domestic abuse. So that piece of work is evolving as well. We're hoping to get the bid finalised in the next few days. We've got real clarity around what we're trying to achieve and what residents are asking us and what they're wanting. And there's some, as always in these cases, there's some key individuals in terms of residents who are going to pick this up. We're going to form a group who are going to drive this forward. So we're building in sustainability with this work as well. And the sustainability is partly going to be driven by some training and education that we're going to build into this, so that residents can continue this work longer term. They were the original four. The fifth one has emerged over the last 10-14 days, and that's what I touched on earlier around childcare and holiday provision over the summer period. So although this piece of work isn't going to lead on that, as I said, we've got some groups working on that individually, but we're going to make sure that physical activity plays a contributory role in that, in terms of that childcare provision and that activity provision over the summer period, which after the announcement an hour ago by Boris is going to probably be a little bit easier than it was when we were talking 2 or 3 days ago. So they're the 5 overriding pieces of work. As they become established and the recovery process progresses, bearing in mind the recovery is almost certainly going to lead into next year, then we'll introduce more support as and when it's identified and as and when the guidance allows us to do that. Adam, do you want to pick anything up, any detail up on the communication side of it?
Yeah, sure. So obviously comms is about tying all that stuff together and presenting it to people in a way that they understand. So some of the areas that we've been working on is looking at getting our healthy Stockport website updated, just with current physical activity guidelines, campaigns, how you can get moving now, etc., etc. Alongside that, we're also looking at establishing a Facebook, Twitter, Instagram presence for Healthy Stockport. In that way, we can not just present public health stuff like mental health, smoking, whatever else, but physical activity stuff. That way, we're at the moment, Stockport Council's social media presence is very diverse. We've got business stuff, economics, whatever else on there, bins, so we can sort of take the physical activity stuff outside of Stockport Council and put it onto Healthy Stockport. With the local pilot community pot, we're working on ways to get some really good engagement in how people apply for funding. So that hasn't been launched yet, but we're looking at things like credit card size application forms that pop out, so that when it goes through people's flap in the door, they actually look at it and doesn't go in the bin. So we're sorting out designs and quotes for that. And then alongside all of this, we're pushing out Keep GM Moving content on social media, looking at getting that counts materials printed. And then when we get a little bit further down the track, we'll look at a press release with the council leader, Life, Leisure, NHS, etc., on there, so we can actually talk about, formally announce the recovery program. And one of the avenues that Russ was talking about, which will be a big focus on the press release, are those care packages, the kits. So we can sort of say to people, look, here's our campaign, Stockport Moving Together, which is the campaign, hashtag Stockport Moving Together, which we're currently using at the moment, but we'll formally announce it as a campaign. So we'll look at having social media graphics with it, having stakeholder briefings beforehand to get them on board to push it, talk about what we're looking at further down the track, but also what we're doing now. I think that sort of covers it.
Thanks, Adam. I think we've lost him, have we? Sasha, do you want to add anything in about the activity packs or the work that you and Ross have been doing?
Yeah, so I'm just catching up from the past couple of weeks anyway. I've been going through everything that's been going on, but the activity packs that we did for young people in Stockport consisted of a variety of things. So they had board games in, sports equipment in. Every pack had a leaflet of useful websites and links to go to for help with mental health or keeping up with schoolwork. What can they go on to join in? Activities for mini competitions throughout the week, lots of different social medias for them to follow, and they all came in a bag. They were delivered to various different organisations who we work in partnership with, then they were distributed to families quite a lot in tower blocks, as Russ was saying before, but with the understanding that they came back to us with how useful they were, what did they do with them, how could they be improved, or if not, what did they enjoy about them. We've still got just a couple left to give out, but they went down really well. I know some of them who took them divided the bags even more. So every bag had 2 board games in and a pack of cards and different sports equipment, and they divided them to go between more families, which that was good. And then having a chat with, I can't think of the board game company, Hasbro's were wanting to do some more stuff as well, so we're just waiting to hear back from Hasbro's about getting some more games.
Thanks, Sasha. I think just before I finish, I think one of the things to stress is that the recovery work is as well as, it's not instead of. So it's building the recovery work into the work we're already doing, but with a particular focus on particular cohorts and working to specific guidance, obviously, around what we can and can't do. What we'll be looking to do, hopefully later in the summer, I don't know whether you heard the announcement just now, but they've just reinforced that in July, early July, outdoor gyms can open and outdoor play, but not indoor. So indoor gyms are going to stay closed for a while, and indoor play centres, soft play, that kind of stuff. So one of the things we were talking about anyway is how do we take structured physical activities into the community, into parks, essentially, into green space, and how do we basically market physical activity in green space. And that will be using, hopefully, these discussions have got to happen in detail, but hopefully using our leisure instructors to go out and actually deliver classes in the green space, in outdoors, because 2 reasons. A, they can't do it indoors for the foreseeable future until guidance changes. But also, if we run recovery work in leisure centres, it's going to attract the active people anyway. So we need to take the activity. If we want to increase activity amongst the most inactive, who are going to need physical activity the most as part of their recovery, we can't expect them to come to us. We're going to have to go to them. And we're going to use it. Life Leisure can use that, as can a lot of trusts. They can use that as a marketing exercise. Getting out there, use it as a roadshow, showcasing what they can do. But hitting those inactive cohorts, and hopefully some of those inactive cohorts who see this work and experience it and enjoy it, will then want to come to more structured indoor stuff when we can. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Russ. That was really, really interesting, and I think we, on the back of that, we there should be a good conversation. I'm just going to go through the chat and see what we've got in the chat first. So, a question from Kat: are your comms teams also linking in with Facebook pages of grassroots groups? Adam, I guess that one's for you.
Yes, kind of. So when we see something that a grassroots group has put out, and we can answer that, and then we'll put something out on social media rather than answering them directly. The idea behind the Healthy Stockport Facebook or social media pages, not just Facebook, but social media pages, will be to pull everyone under one banner, so that if people have questions about not just physical activity, mental health, whatever it may be, they've got a single place to go to. They're not just trying to find things, and not just going to the council's Twitter page. We've actually got a dedicated resource there, a dedicated channel that we can answer queries on social media. So yes, there will be more two-way conversations. We can engage with them that way. I saw another one of the questions was, are you offering non-digital? So yes, some of the stuff we're looking at is pamphlets for older people. Once we work out what's happening in Stockport, in terms of, is there walking groups still happening, what centres are open and what services are happening, events, that kind of thing. We'll look at a pamphlet that we can sort of say, if you're an older person, here's what you could do. So we're sort of looking into that way. We're also doing things like the council's newsletter that goes out, press releases. We can use the leader. She goes on radio quite often, so we can use her as we need to talk about physical activity. So I guess the main thing for me, main thing for comms, is to look at multi-channel stuff. And I mean, I bang on about it a fair bit previously. We've got a lot of people to reach, but what we're trying to do is to bring everything together with the Healthy Stockport stuff and the Stockport Moving Together campaign, and then push it out on as many different channels as possible in that way that we can reach all the people that we need to.
Thanks, Adam. There was a question around the activity bags themselves and packs themselves, but I think that's been answered, isn't it? You posed that one. Do you want to?
Me and Sasha are chatting direct. We're going to hopefully catch up tomorrow and have a route through the bags.
Fantastic, thank you. A question here, probably for you, Russ. What are the other elements of the bigger recovery plan, and are there joint messages between them?
The bigger messages, you mean the wider council recovery work?
Yeah.
So it's all the kind of stuff you would expect in terms of recovery, economic recovery, town centre recovery, health recovery more generally. Obviously, big conversations going around diabetes, anxiety, mental well-being, mental health more generally, obesity, etc. So there's the health ones. So economic health, how people can be supported to come out of their homes and start to engage in the community safely. So lots of work with businesses. It'll be going on across all your boroughs as well. How do we support? There's a campaign being launched called One Stockport, which is very much around shop local, use local businesses, support your local retailers, support your local providers and services. So it's very much focusing on the bigger work around Stockport is very much around business and economic recovery. But yes, we're aligned with that. Yeah.
Thank you. Loads of questions here. That's good. So one from Kat: are you using the learning from what's already happening at street level? For example, more creative ways of staying or becoming more active? Yeah,
so the work that Ross has been doing and Rachel in Bridlington, that street level community engagement, the information, and that's very much what we're using in the Lancashire Hill work, and how we're working with the residents in Lancashire Hill. So the learning that's coming out of the local pilot, we're applying what we know is working and what people are telling us they're valuing. We're applying those lessons to this work. Yeah.
Fantastic. Question from Mike: is there a plan of how, and this might be a broad one because there's a number of localities that have said that they're looking at this structured activity in green space. So Mike's question is there a plan of how parks or green space activity will be advertised? Similar plans in Salford for children and young people, trying to strike the right balance between engaging well and not attracting half our population to one place.
Yeah, so the answer to that is we're not going to do anything yet, because chances are hopefully we'd get more than 6 people. So we're not going to do anything yet. It's something that we're looking at in 4, 6, 8 weeks time. And those conversations about the how are just starting to happen. So we've brought in the head of neighbourhoods into this conversation, who oversees all the green space, part of his brief. So the how we're going to do this, because the biggest issue, as you say, is how it's going to be policed. So we don't want to create any policing issues, policing with a small p, around that work. So we'll do it when it's the right time in terms of what the guidance is saying. But we'll do it in conjunction with the head of neighbourhoods and green space to make sure that we do it in the right place in terms of the locality where we're going to have maximum impact in terms of inactivity levels, but also in the right parks and green space where this can be better managed. So we're not going to just select parks off the top of our heads because we think it's a good idea. We're going to work with the teams that work in those parks day in, day out to advise us on which are the best parks to do it in terms of crowd control, management and policing, and how to do that.
Cool. Any comments from any other localities where, like Lisa, you mentioned it in Rochdale, how are you thinking of promoting?
Correct. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Similar really, just having a chat with community builders, see if there's like an appetite there. We're thinking specifically in the LP target area, specifically as well because the BME community have been hard hit by this. So we're looking at talking to the teams, just like Russ has said. And again, it's not going to be done for a good couple of weeks because you're only allowed the 6. But what we are looking at doing is targeting those that have got long-term conditions that are not able to access the online stuff, because we know that that's been a big issue in our target area, and invitation only for that. So that's one that we're starting to do is an invitation only, and the other one is the same as us. It's an idea that we want to do, but working with Link for Life, how it's best to do that within the guidelines, and so that you don't get everybody there at one time.
Okay, cool. So it might be useful, and it might be something for GM Active to pick up actually about how this promotion's going to be working. So for all the trusts to have that conversation. I know they've got a health group, so that might be something that their health group wants to look at in terms of sharing the approach that each place is going to take to run these structured activities and ensure that, you know, half the population doesn't turn up. Question from Rob, and this one probably is applicable to everyone, so I don't know how well everyone else is engaged in their place recovery. So how did you manage to position this in the wider recovery in the first place? How easy was this getting wider buy-in, and why have you been successful?
It was a bit of a two-way conversation really. From a council point of view, we were aware that there were programmes that were funded by the council, particularly through public health, where some work was happening, but could we do more? Could we have more of an impact? So the GP referral would be one example. So there was work going on with the GP referral staff, contacting clients on that programme on one-to-one basis, providing support. But could we do anything else? Could we go further, particularly as things were eased? So there was a concern from the local authority that you know, could we get more from what we were funding, and could that be better aligned to what's now more applicable and needed? And vice versa, Life Leisure were coming to us and saying, we've got these staff who aren't furloughed because we can't furlough them because they're grant funded, publicly funded in one way or another. We want to have some real impact in our community. How can we still make a difference to our community, even though 80 to 90% of our staff are furloughed? Still want to have a presence and contribute to this piece of work. So it was a bit of a two-way conversation. Nobody needed convincing, and because we have a clear strategic positioning of physical activity in Stockport anyway, it was something that people's minds turned to as part of recovery.
Anything to come back on that, Rob? Or
no, I just think it's really interesting because obviously the presentation, the way you talked it through was I guess really clear, and it seems like you've made a lot of progress in what feels like quite a short space of time. But I guess the key to that is being able to get that initial engagement, to be able to get the alignment of partners together behind that in terms of, like you say, the assets and the resources that you have got available. So I guess you've taken a very proactive approach, but you seem to have made a lot of progress in quite a short space of time.
I think you're right. The speed of response is because we've realigned and not reinvented.
I was going to say, just chipping in here with some Salford experience stuff. The recovery plan's actually built over 15 strands in Salford. So whilst it's a one recovery plan, it actually breaks down into 15 thematic areas covering everything from housing and homelessness through to digital, through to health, through to, you know, food poverty. From the Salford CVS angle, it's taken quite a lot of capacity just to keep, you know, the voluntary sector discussion going on across the whole thematic areas. So I think where physical activity has been working well, from the conversations we've had in Salford, it's where you had those relationships already. So it's, again, it's not reinventing the wheel, it's the realignment of existing relationships and existing work. And you've got your champions already in those conversations. Where it'll be harder is those strands and conversations in localities where you've not got people, hate to use the phrase, on message, but, you know, when you're preaching to the choir, it's easier to have those conversations than with some of the hard sells. I mean, in terms of the Salford split, there's probably about 9-10 of the thematic areas where physical activity either are in the conversation or could be in the conversation. Some of them probably aren't priorities for physical activity right now. So, for example, whilst we can have a say in homelessness and housing, we're probably not high enough the agenda for them, whereas there's obviously some of the children, people and families, and some of the health discussions were right up there in the front of the conversation.
Question for other localities then, are you in these same discussions? Are you aware of what's happening in your place? Don't necessarily need to say yes or no, but is this now an opportunity to go and find out and ask the questions of where those recovery plans are, what stage you're in, and who's having those conversations? I'll just leave that one hanging, and I'll move on to the next question. So last question in the chat was from Ben. He was wondering, will online provision continue for those who prefer it? So you're not stopping online provision, I assume?
No, because this is just a stage in our active community development. Everything we want to do and did want to do before COVID is about continual development. So nothing's designed to be around for 6 weeks and then disappear. It's part of the systems change, isn't it? So if you're gonna have impact on systems change, you've got to change things, not just do things. So
can I chip in as well, Russ?
Yeah.
For that one, because we're doing like quite a bit of online stuff with young people, and we're going to continue to do online stuff as well. And everything's eased up, and we're back to what we would call normality as we can. But we've had a lot of them say that, you know, they preferred doing it online. We're still doing the fit element side of things and doing exercises from their own home, but a lot of them are preferring it because they didn't like going out into the streets or with big groups of people, because a lot of like the young people we're working with, their mental health is not so great, but doing things online has been keeping them engaged still, and they want to continue to do things online if they don't want to come to a group.
Okay, cool, thank you. The other two more questions. Do Life Leisure Exercise Referral Team have learning from their COPD and respiratory related programs that could be used to inform COVID related rehab via exercise?
Yeah, the answer is yes. The detailed answer we could get, because Michelle will be able to give the detailed answer to that. But yeah, the skills that those staff have are very relevant to COVID patients. Absolutely.
Okay, and the final question for the chat, there may be some more in the room, we can probably take a couple more. You mentioned care homes. Some day services for people with learning impairments will be opening in July. Are you planning any support for this group?
It's a conversation we can have. We've started with 4 particular pieces of work. As I said, things will come on board as we develop. But yeah, nothing's ruled out, nothing's ruled in, because at the bottom line, if we're going to impact on inactivity, we're going to have to look at a whole breadth, aren't we? And if people come to us saying they need help, then we'll look at how we do that, working with them. But yeah, we've not got the answers to everything. And you know, the programs that we have decided to start with we'll learn from them, and we'll, if we have to do it again, we'll probably do it better than we're doing it at the moment. But that's part of the process, isn't it? And there'll be things that we haven't thought of that will come up in the future. The challenge there, the important thing there, is to make sure that as you put yourself in a position to be able to meet the challenges and the requests as they come along. You can't anticipate them all, but you need to have the infrastructure there to be able to react when requests come in or when things change. If we go backwards, if the lockdown comes back in, if we have an outbreak in Stockport and lockdown comes back in for Stockport, then we need to react to that.
That's all the questions in the chat. Are there any additional questions from the room? Yeah.
So this falls best in AOB because ultimately I think it's something that's obviously just been thrown on us literally in the last 2 hours. Obviously with Boris's announcements today, it has stated that community centres can reopen, but obviously we're not doing the indoor sport, which is, I'll be honest, I'm gutted. But I have had a load of emails, tweets and Facebook just exploding where there's now a bunch of community groups, sports club, physical activity groups going, hang on, we're based in a community centre. If that community centre opens, I'm going to lose my slot unless we start paying for it. We can't afford paying for it, but we can't do our judo session, Zumba session, dance session, pick a session. Now, obviously, I don't think in our patch in Salford, I don't think it's going to be too horrific because most of the community centres are owned by ourselves or Salford Community Leisure. We know there'll be an open conversation with them, but I'm just conscious this is going to start bubbling the next week or so, I suspect. So no one will have had any thoughts on it long term because we didn't expect it to happen in this weird unlockdown way, but I just wanted to get some gut instincts whilst we're on this call and we've all got the same kind of things in our heads.
Okay. Anybody got any views, thoughts?
I know with Life Leisure, I know we're a leisure facility, but probably runs similar to bookings for community centres. We've said those people who had regular slots each week would have the priority to keep their slots. I don't know if that helps any, but that's the that we were going down.
Marie, just from SEL, that is basically our exact same viewpoint. Any long-standing bookings at any of our facilities of any kind, football, badminton, whatever it is, they're getting priority, so they'll be notified if and when we do reopen, do they want to continue their previous booking. And then those slots that were previously vacant will be the first that are up for grabs. So generally speaking, the vast majority of our bookings are long-term, and there's the odd hour here and there of occasional bookings. They'll be the ones that will go first. So in terms of...
I wasn't too panicky about SXCL because I know the venues you own that can open. You've got a pretty long-standing relationship with the physical activity groups at least, because they're the ones who are not going to be able to be active. But it's just something that I'm just aware of we're going to start getting inquiries about because people are going to have knee-jerks and nervousness because they can't recover and we've got no timeline off Boris when we're going to be re-looked at as an industry.
Mm. Any other thoughts on that one?
All right. A bit of a dead room one, Richard. It was...
No, it's okay. It might be something for something like GM Active to pick up. And equally, there's been it's a recent announcement, isn't it? So probably people haven't seen it. So thinking may not be fully thought through on that particular one.
Richard,
yeah.
I mean, this is something the whole sector is obviously grappling with and trying to work out and the long-term implications of this. But I'm just wondering, is there anything through the Sport England relationship and around how GM can start to position itself at the front of the conversation around, I guess, how that phased reopening of indoor leisure facilities might happen? Because you've got a really good proactive group with GM Active. You've got some really innovative work happening across GM. It just feels like this could be a place where you could try and start doing some of this a bit differently, because whilst everyone's waiting for guidance, we're all sitting there lobbying. Well, I don't know. Is there another way of trying to approach the conversation?
If I can just come in.
Sorry.
Just
go on, Nick.
No, I was just going to say, with GM Active, Rob, it's a good point. Through work that we've supported them with, they are at the minute sort of looking at what they're going to do, how they're going to reopen it, and what they've implemented is a Future Fit, is a learning development tool. It's all online, which is really shaping up their staff while they're being furloughed, so that they can access the training that they're allowed to access, so they are ready for whenever sites do open. The ones who are taking the lead on that are very much Salford, Wigan and Rochdale, but all GM Active sites have been involved with the development of it. But the long-term view was they've got 3,500 staff members in GM Active. Before COVID hit, the idea was creating an online portal where they could come together and have healthy conversations, training, making every contact count, so that GM Active staff, all the staff, no matter what level they're at, understand sort of the benefits of physical activity, and they're speaking the same language. COVID hit, so it sort of accelerated it quite fast. But where the gap was where these staff are at home. If they're having to come in and reopen a leisure centre after 3 months sat at home, there's a bit of nervousness around that. What are they going to do? How's the role going to be different? They've never done training around sort of or not all of them have done it around cleaning the equipment. So there's stuff like they're doing at the minute. But nationally, I know Simspa are looking at what's happening in Greater Manchester. They really are taking the lead on it, and I think the idea is how that can be shared nationally.
Yeah, from a Sport England perspective as well, we've also had conversations with Andy and Pete, who are heading up the GM Active stuff, around what support and how it can move forward. So conversations are happening.
I think there might be a comms piece actually at some point about some of the positivity, like some of the stuff Nick's just spoke about, because I'm just conscious with a lot of the, and again, I'll go social media, which is phrased by my own bubble, which is mainly indoor sports people. There's a growing amount of anger now starting to develop, because you can go for a pint, you can go for a pizza, but we can't go to the gym.
Yeah.
And there's been a few angry at Sport England tweets, shall we say, as well, saying what you're doing on the lobbying. It might be a case of saying as GM, we can't change COVID, but actually we're getting ready because we're doing what you just said, Nick. I think the messages of you can do stuff outdoors is starting to grate people a little bit.
Yeah.
And maybe that's some of my own social stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've seen stuff on Twitter there. So Swim England have jumped on board as well. They've started their own campaign, Save Our Pills, just within the last sort of hour. Yeah,
well, I guess it's a similar thing. There's certain activities, even though we are the more active people, you can't do it outside, and running's not a replacement for it, or etc. So they are starting to get a bit itchy.
Yeah, good point.
And I also know there's a paper going to the, I think it's the Health and Social Care Partnership as well, that Pete and GM Active have pulled together. So there's lots of conversations happening nationally, regionally, looking with GM Active about support, the comeback, I guess, the phoenix from the flames. I think it's been described in somebody's blog somewhere.
Project Phoenix.
Project Phoenix. There you go. So I know those discussions are happening. Unfortunately, we are at the beck and call of government policy. So I'm sure Sport England are doing as much as they can to lobby and have those discussions at a national level. But we can only do what we can do with the resources we've got. So parks and green spaces seem to be the place for focus at the moment. Community centres opening up will offer opportunity, but again, I know badminton have issued some guidance around badminton in spaces, so there might be opportunity there. But we'll be rest assured, I'm sure GM will be ready once the green light's given, and there'll be a huge amount of information about what can or can't do. I know, for example, Pure Gym have sent me a video telling me how great their new facilities are going to be once it's all open. So there's a lot of pushing going to come our way. Is there anything else that people want to have a conversation about on this particular subject? I guess one of my asks, one of the actions I'd like to ask for is for people to go away and have a look in their local authorities and places about where their recovery plans are, if you're not aware already. So actually, when we come back in a couple of weeks, we might have a clearer idea across all localities where the recovery plans are, and what sort of opportunity they provide for everybody, and we can probably have a bit more of a rounded conversation on that.
Just to add before I have to go in a minute, Richard, but just to add before I go, don't forget walking and cycling will be at the heart of all of your authorities' plans. So we know the work that's going on around walking and cycling infrastructure and so on, which is being accelerated. So we've not particularly focused on walking and cycling on our bit of the work, because we know as part of the bigger piece of work, linking into one of the earlier questions, we know that piece of work is happening, and the cycle lane, pop-up cycle lanes, and the walking, widening walking pavements and pedestrian areas and so on, that's happening. So we don't need to physically get involved with that. We just need to be aware that that's happening and link it in where necessary.
Cool. Just finally say thank you, Russ, for the session. Really informative.